You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Well, thank you for joining us for this edition of Inside GCT here at Germantown Community Theatre. And tonight we are going to be talking about our next production, Rope. And I am so thrilled to have the director of Rope with us and one of his actors. And I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves, if you will, please.
Sure. So my name is Chase. I am directing Rope here at Germantown Community Theatre.
And I'm James Green. I'm playing Rupert Caudell in Rope at Germantown Community Theatre.
Well, thank you both for joining me. If you have never watched this program before, Inside GCT is an interview program where we will talk with the director and an actor about the upcoming production so that you might learn more about it and have reason to want to come and see it. Or reason to avoid it, right? However it could be.
I mean, they already know who the director is.
And that in and of itself is reason not to come. Chase, tell us about Rope.
So Rope was written in 1927 by Patrick Hamilton, and it tells the story about two boys, Brandon and Granillo, who are college-age kids. They go to Oxford University, and they have planned the perfect murder. They take one of their classmates, a fellow named Ronald Kentley, who we never actually see, and they strangle him with rope, and they stuff his body in a trunk, and then they invite Ronald's closest friends and family over to have a dinner party on top of the trunk. And the remainder of the play is these two boys trying to get away with the perfect murder while also displaying it in front of everyone.
Interesting.
And that's just the first 10 minutes, so I didn't spoil anything.
I was going to say, my understanding was most of it, the murder and everything's happened.
First few minutes.
That's right. How exciting. And this is coming at a very interesting time of year for GCT. Tell us about that.
Well, it's coming in on the Christmas slot, and I think that it's the perfect Christmas show. I mean, one, you have a trunk, right? Two, you have friends coming around to gather and be festive, right? Three, you have cold weather because they are,
That's right.
There's dancing that takes place. So really, if you think about it, it's a jolly show. There's a lot of happiness that takes place in this thing. So I think it's the appropriate Christmas. We're just missing a Christmas tree and a visit from Santa Claus himself.
Well, maybe Santa's in the trunk.
Idea for a concept.
Well, Jim, tell us about your character.
Well, my character is Rupert Caudell, who is a friend of the boys and has been sort of like a mentor of theirs, and a lot of their ideas have come from him. And he comes to this party, and he begins to suspect something is wrong, something is kind of not right with what is going on here. For one thing, they're having dinner off a trunk where he's got a perfectly good dining room. In the other room, even though they might be filled with books, they could take the books off the table while they eat. And the boys are acting kind of suspiciously a little bit, especially Granillo. And he sort of finally figures out what they have done.
A question, does the audience figure out at the same time as Rupert, or does he come to it before, or does the audience come to it before?
Well, the audience knows what's going on because they've seen them kill the guy. So.
All right. So, yeah,
So the audience knows.
First few minutes, I'm telling you, the audience knows from the word go.
Who the killers are, but it's how will they get away with it? Is the story of, is the question on this story.
Who's in your cast, Chase?
So we have Joe Prestigiacomo, who is playing Brandon. We have Ryan Spearman, who's playing Granillo. We have Whitney Boggess, who's actually, my understanding is I believe she's new to the Memphis theater scene, so GCT's Rope will be her first show in town, and we're very happy to have her. She plays Sabot, which is in the script, it is the French butler. For our purposes, it is the British maid. for very obvious reasons. We also have Kristen Vandevort, who is Layla Arden. She is a classmate of Brandon and Granillo's. We have Ty Hoskins, who is also brand new to the theater scene, playing Kenneth Raglan. We have, of course, Jim Dale playing Rupert Caudell. We have Louise Levin, who is playing Mrs. Debenham. And we have Beverly Morlang, who is playing Lady Johnstone Kentley. In the script, it is Sir Johnstone Kentley, the father of the victim in the trunk. But again, for our purposes, it's Lady Johnstone Kentley, the mother of the victim in the trunk. And let me make sure that that's everyone. I believe that's everyone, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about your design crew. Who's doing all of that work?
So Andy Saunders, he actually is the gentleman responsible for the design, and he has been just a joy to work with. I mean, from day one, he and I sat down and we discussed, he said, "What do you want?" And I just really appreciated that he didn't come to me with an idea already in mind. He asked me what I wanted, and he's really making it come true. So he is very responsible for the set, but of course we've also had the fantastic Betty Dilly, who has provided us with many, many props. This is an incredibly prop-heavy show, and so her task has been no small one. I would like to give a small shout out to the Friends of Germantown Library for actually donating the books that we'll be using in this production, so we are very grateful for their contribution as well. And then, of course, Dan Capera has assisted in putting it together, and then Justin Asher is our producer for this little endeavor. So really, the entire team has just been a delight. And of course, I would be nowhere without my own stage manager, Heather Hodges. She has just been fantastic as well.
Who's doing your light design?
Edna Dinwiddie is doing our light design, and she is incredibly excited to do it, and I'm excited to have her.
And your costumes?
Ashley Whitten Capera is doing our costumes, and again, that's another one who, she actually recently costumed me in Sweeney, and just her work is fantastic. So I'm really, really happy to have the crew that I have.
Jim Dale, tell us something about being an actor in this work. It sounds like it's an ensemble piece of sorts.
Very much an ensemble piece. Everybody is pretty much involved in what goes on, and it's nice working with the people I'm working with in this. We're all sort of supporting each other and helping each other out, and it's been I've been having fun. Of course, it's a line heavy show for me, so I've got to remember all those things. And I'm not as good at learning and remembering lines as I used to be. You lose gray cells as you get older, and all of mine are coming from my short-term memory. I think. But anyway, it's I'm enjoying it. It's a real joy. And Chase is, for a first-time director, I guess. Well, more or less first time. You've been since McCoy?
Yeah, since 2013.
Yeah. So I think for basically first-time director of a community production, he's doing a nice job.
I thank you for that.
Let's circle back to the set a little. Chase, tell us how you got to this vision. You talked about Andy coming to you and saying, "Tell me what you want," but share it with us.
So people who come to see this production might actually be familiar with Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, which is the only film adaptation of this play. There are other films that take this play as reference, but Alfred Hitchcock is really the only one who took Rope and did Rope. And he set it in New York. And my understanding is that stage productions that have done this before, or other stage productions that have done this show, frequently set it in New York. In fact, it was directed here several years ago, directed by Andy, and he set it in New York. But the more I looked at it, and the more I just kind of got into the heads of these characters, the more I just thought, I feel like these guys really need to be Londoners. And I don't really know what informed that decision other than I feel like if you see an American student kill a student and put him in a trunk, then it's just like, oh, well, that happens. But when you see a Londoner do it, it's almost shocking because, and again, I don't quite know why. But the idea was I wanted these boys to be almost the perfect, even though it's in England, the perfect all-American boys, if you will. So they are incredibly intelligent, as indicated by the fact that they go to Oxford, but they're also affluent. And so setting it in the time period in which we're setting it, It takes place in the 1920s. I think specifically we agreed 1926 is when we're setting this thing. And so the costuming will be Edwardian, but the building that they stay in, which this play takes place in their flat, is actually Victorian. And so because the idea is that it was an older building that they happened to move into, they are college kids, so they probably wouldn't be able to afford a more modern building at the time. So that was kind of what informed my decision there, was just kind of reading it, and I just thought, I really want these boys to be people that could conceivably get away with the perfect murder, and that they are smart, they are affluent, they are likable. And so that's kind of what I went with for this design.
So clearly we are not finished,
Right.
but can you give us a picture of what this may look like when it is complete?
Certainly. So the set itself will actually look, in terms of set pieces, will not look much more full than this. And that's because the play takes place on a night when they're about to go back to Oxford. So they will have had the majority of their things packed away, and we'll have crates and luggage and things like that down left here. These bookshelves will be lined with books, and that's to emphasize their intelligence. But they will also have books spread across the floor, and that's because Brandon has recently come into a library. An uncle of his has passed and has donated a large collection of books to Brandon. And that ostensibly is why he's inviting Ronald's friends and family over, is to look at these books, when in actuality we know there's something a lot more sordid going on. So the bookshelves will be covered there, and then we'll have some various and sundry pieces of art up here, which I'm really pleased with. There will be some subtle nods to Cain and Abel and the idea of philosophy, because there's a lot of discussion of different philosophers going on here. So other than that, we'll have, of course, dust cloths over some of the furniture, again, just to emphasize the idea that they are on their way out. But like I said, the majority of it's a prop-heavy show, so that's going to be the meat and potatoes of it.
So Jim, as an actor, what is your process in a work like this? There's not a whole lot of furniture, there's a lot of props. Talk to us about what you would do, what you have done, to act in a work like this.
Well, I'm trying to. It's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly what my process is for. Just trying to remember blocking and lines at the moment and juggling. Right now, I'm not completely off script yet, so I'm having to juggle whiskey glasses and cigarette cases and my right hand is almost completely busy because he's the character that I play was injured in the First World War and has to walk and has a crippled leg and has to walk around with a cane. So I've got to hold the cane the whole time. And so I've been trying to just juggle all the parts and pieces of just the physical, getting around the stage and that sort of thing. And the characters sort of come without organically. I haven't had to really stop and think too much about it because it's pretty straightforward from the dialogue and what he says and what's said about him, who he is, and what the boys think his beliefs are, when it turns out that his beliefs are a little different than theirs. At the end, they don't realize that, of course, until later on. But it's hard to. I always have a hard time describing about how I do what I do on stage. Most of it is usually just comes organic. And it's got to be in the script somewhere. I can't just put some sort of arbitrary thing on it. That's why I generally don't make up backstories for the characters I play. Like I know it helps a lot of actors to get into their characters by making a backstory. What's happened to them before this goes on. But this character doesn't really need that because you more or less know what's going on by what's said about him and what he says, what his past is. So I don't really have to make up a backstory for this one, and I generally don't. Usually when I usually just take what the character says and what is said about them as all the clues I need as to how to play it.
Sure. Chase, what's your process as a director?
So, because as Jim said, this is my first kind of community gig, my process is a new process, but I kind of approach it from a conceptual standpoint. What is it that I'm trying to get across here? What point am I trying to make? As an actor, my philosophy is that I believe theater is necessary for communication. I believe that theater is a way to communicate the audience to the people on stage and vice versa. And whatever that thing that needs to be communicated is, of course, is part on the audience, and what they take is what they've seen, and part on the actors, what they deliver. And so as the director, my change of thought there was, I can't let the audience assume what they want. This is the story that I want to tell, and I want to be able to tell it as clearly as possible. And so that started out large, and I said, okay, what is it that I want to tell here? Okay, I want to tell the story about how someone who's got everything going for them can commit something so heinous. Okay, how do we tell that? Okay, well then they should look this way. They should behave this way. The characters should look this way. Where they live should be, as such. Narrow it down further and further, and then getting into the minutia. How do they react to the people on stage with them? The relationship that Brandon has with Granillo is remarkably different from the one he has with Rupert, and the one he has with his own maid. So my process was to start broad and then really kind of take it in.
Has there been a moment that, and this is a question to both of you, what's your favorite moment in the process thus far? It could be an acting moment, it could be a moment that the actors just got it. What stands out to you in your memory?
Goodness. Nothing springs to my mind is the whole process so far has been a good one. I can't think of any sort of thing off the top of my head, any incident that's happened that stands out to me as unique or special, or not necessarily. It's all special, you know what I mean, but that stands out in a single. I don't know. I don't have one.
I actually,
Yet to come.
I actually give this note every night after rehearsal, and it's that every rehearsal we have done has just gotten better and better and better than the last. And I am so pleased with the direction that this show has gone, and it started off in a great place. So in terms of one specific moment, there are so many good ones in which the actors are finding new things. But I will brag on Beverly Morlang, who, as I said, is playing our Lady Johnstone Kentley. There's a remarkable scene where, I'm going to try not to give too much away, but I don't think I am, where she gets a phone call from her husband who is at home. And her husband tells her that their son has not come home. He was expected back at a certain time, and he's not come home. And Beverly is doing this remarkable thing where before she comes to the phone, she has just left kind of a party atmosphere, if you will. They've been drinking and dancing and looking at books, and so she's elated, and then she gets on the phone, and the phone conversation starts. She's very jovial, like she's just got this party, and then her husband tells her that their son hasn't come home, and then you see this gradient kind of fall across her face so that she becomes less jovial and more concerned about the state of her son. And that really feeds into the tension that comes in the next few scenes. So you have this remarkable contrast of incredibly jovial to really concerned and tense in just a matter of a few lines.
Well, that's the point where that phone call is actually the point where before that, in the first 2/3 of the play, reads and feels very much a comedy almost, because it's very light. It's very lighthearted, and their talk is very urbane and light. But that moment is when things sort of start to get serious, because that's the last clue for my character that something that tells him what he thinks has gone on here at the house.
It's interesting that you mentioned the beginning feels like a comedy, because I've heard it said that in something like a thriller or a mystery that you almost have to direct it like a comedy, because there has to be some choreography with it of hitting certain marks. Has that been true for this process?
I say most definitely.
I think so, yeah.
I say most definitely. The way we have done the beginning of this show is actually, the way it's written is you see him putting the body in the trunk. I didn't like that opening, so I blocked my own opening, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I'm sure the discerning audience member will know what I mean when I say that. But the opening is very tense, very tense. It's almost frightening. But as that moment dissipates and the guests start to come in, it becomes, like Jim said over here, it becomes very light, very jovial. And there are actually jokes written into the script. Rupert's character, I think, is hysterical. He has a few witty one-liners. He's a very dry person, if you will, in that his humor comes from, I guess, almost mockery, though mockery is not a good thing to call it.
It's not mocking. It's more.
It's kind of snarky. He's just really kind of snarky. Yeah. So his character in and of itself is just hilarious. And then we've got a few moments of blocking that are really funny. You got the whole, rule of 3 idea where, you should do something 3 times, and by the 3rd time it's hysterical, So we've got a lot of that going on, and we were able to find some really good, funny bits in this thing. And it's funny because when you read it, it reads like a Dickens novel.
Right.
But to see it played out on stage, to actually see the life that these actors have brought their characters, we have managed to find some really good, lighthearted moments.
And then, of course, the flip side to that is there's a great deal of tension and suspense.
Absolutely.
Neither of you are strangers to this stage. Let's move a little away from from Rope and talk about you as individuals. You are not strangers to this stage. Tell us about your experience at Germantown Community Theatre.
Oh, me? Well, I think I've been doing shows off and on with Germantown Community Theatre ever since it first started. Back when Carrie was here, and was the head, was a guiding light of the theater. I remember being at doing a couple of shows at the location before this one.
That's right, at the church.
At the church. We went from a church to a schoolhouse because this is an old schoolhouse. But I don't even think that church is.
It's not there anymore.
Still is gone, I believe. But and when we moved, when the theater moved into here, it was a big deal. It was a big upgrade because I don't think the original community theater didn't have only had about 2/3 of the number of seats this one has, and the stage was smaller. And to get from one side to the other, at one point, to get from one side of the stage to the other, you had to go outside. But I've done quite a few things here over the years, and I like working in this environment.
What were you most recently seen in here at Germantown?
The last thing I did here was Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
That's right. Heavily Ostrander nominated Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
I was pleased about that. I didn't get nominated, though, which I thought was a huge mistake on the part of the judges, but
But what do they know?
But what do they know?
Well, there's always this show. And Chase?
My first show at the Germantown Community Theatre was 12th Night, directed by Justin Asher, back in, I think that was 2014, wasn't it? I believe so.
Something like that, yeah.
Either 14 or 15, I honestly can't remember. I think it was 14 because then I did Rumors that opened the next season. But I've done 12th Night, which I got to play Sir Toby Belch, which has actually been a dream role of mine. So I was very happy to be able to play that character. And then since then, I've done a lot here. Highlights, I did Rumors, which was very well received by GCT audiences. And though Jason Spitzer will deny it until the day he dies, I was in that show and had a very good time with it. And then I assistant directed Your Good Man, Charlie Brown. I actually assisted with the youth cast because we had the two casts, an adult cast and a youth cast. And most of my work was with the children. But so I've had some community directing experience, but again, this is my first actual directorship.
Yes, and we will see how that fares.
Right.
Yes. Okay, so I have a series of rapid-fire questions for you. and just whatever rolls off the tongue, Chase, careful. What I'd like to know is, first, what is your favorite color?
I like red, but not just any red. It must be a blood red, like a deep maroon.
Brown. I like brown.
Okay, and what is your least favorite color?
I think that bright, really bright green. I like more muted greens, pastel green, I guess.
Not a big fan of yellow.
What is your favorite food?
Chicken parmesan.
I like a good steak.
And your least favorite food?
I don't know. I would guess. I'm not a big fan of broccoli.
You don't get this big not being a fan of food. So there's really not one that I don't like. I'm not a huge Brussels sprouts fan.
I like Brussels sprouts.
I like Brussels sprouts. What's
Yeah.
wrong with you?
I mean, cooked in bacon fat, sure, but like again, you don't get this big by not liking food, you know.
What is the last book that you read? Or are reading?
The last book that I read, I recently finished book 4 in the Preacher comic book series, and am reading 5 Days at Memorial, which is a nonfiction account of a hospital ravaged by Hurricane Katrina.
Well, the last novel I read was a book called The Mist in the Mirror by Susan Hill, who wrote Woman in Black. And which is a wonderful, which I think could adapt to the stage really nicely. Of course, I'm not going to be the one to do it, but somebody could. And I read plays mostly. I like to get on, Samuel French and browse, and something sounds interesting, I'll order it and buy it. So that's why I mostly read drama, mostly read plays. And also another thing I like to read when I have the time is true crime.
Okay. What was the last movie that you saw?
Hell and High Water.
Doctor Strange.
I haven't gotten around to that one yet. I want to see it.
It's good.
Okay, if you were a superhero, what would be your super ability?
If I had a nickel. I think it would be the ability to, kind of like the Wonder Twins, to turn into anything that I want. To transmogrify, if you will.
Shapeshift.
Yeah, shapeshift. Yeah. That's a better word.
I'd like invisibility, I think would be fun.
It's always interesting to hear what people say. Do they want to fly? Do they want to be invisible? Shapeshift.
Well, that would be fun too, because that would be almost as fun as
Being invisible, right?
Being invisible, I think.
Yeah, I could turn into a lamppost and I'd still be invisible.
Shapeshift into like a dog, and overhear other people's conversation. I'm gonna take the place of your dog for a couple hours and hear what you really think of me.
See, we learned so much.
That invisibility, I think, would be fun.
If someone wrote your biography, what would the title be?
I saw a billboard on my way to Chicago that had the title of my biography written on it. Skillets, Jams, and Country Hams.
I have no idea what my title would be, what the title of my autobiography would be, or biography. No idea. Nothing springs into my mind.
Maybe that's the title.
Now, in parentheses, it would say Exit 15.
Oh, yours.
Because that was on the billboard as well. Yeah.
Yes. Cracker Barrel on there as well?
No, actually, it was some little mom and pop shop.
Wow.
I don't know what the title is.
Very nice. Okay, so if you were arrested, what would your criminal charges be? What would you have been arrested for?
Loitering, because I'm lame.
That's a good. Probably. I don't know. Disturbing the peace? I don't know. I think. Well, that you could have fun with that one.
I like that. That's very good. All right, the last question is, if you won the lottery, what would you do with your winnings?
I'd give some to charity, but I think I'd buy myself a really nice sports car too. I think that's what I'd buy myself. The first purchase I would make for me would be a really, really nice sports car.
All right.
I would give a hefty chunk of it to my own mother so that she wouldn't have to work a day in her life because I love my mom.
That's a good one.
I would also donate a hefty chunk to charity, and then I would probably travel, honestly.
The last thing I like to do in every episode of Inside GCT is give you the opportunity to look into the camera and give your personal pitch for Rope. So, Jim, will you start it out?
For a good time, see Rope. See Rope. Bring your friends. If you want to get rid of them, this will show you a nice way to do it. If there's anybody you want to kill, come to see Rope and see and find out a really nice way of maybe getting away with murder.
How to maybe get away with murder.
How to maybe.
My tagline actually would be a question, and it's, if you could commit the perfect crime, would you?
Interesting. Chase, since you're the director, give us the dates, please, of Rope.
December 2nd through the 18th, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Fridays and Saturdays at 8 p.m., Sundays at 2:30 p.m.
Spoken like a perfect gentleman. Thank you so much. You can get tickets by visiting gctcomeplay.org or by calling our box office at 453-7447. Thank you so much for joining us.